So, guys, Novak did his first interview after what happened at the Australian Open, and I wanted to just kind of share it with you guys and react to it and get your reactions. I thought it was a pretty good interview. I thought the person who interviewed Novak asked all the right questions, and Novak didn't shy away from anything, gave honest answers, and people kind of either put him as the villain or the hero. He was saying, I understand both sides. I just want people to hear me and respect me. So let's get into this interview, hearing and respecting Novak.
Had an interesting few months, leading news bulletins around the world with your attempt to gain entry to Australia and compete at the Australian Open, but you've kept mostly silent until now. Why have you agreed to this interview?
The reason why I was silent up to now is because I wanted to respect my colleagues, tennis, Australian Open, and obviously prior to that, the legal processes that I was part of. And also I wanted to take some time to reflect on everything that has happened because there was a lot of emotions.
Do you feel that you've been misunderstood or misrepresented in recent weeks?
I feel there was a lot of wrong conclusions, and I was really sad and disappointed with the way it all ended for me in Australia. And it wasn't easy also following the media and everything that was written about me in the previous 4 or 5 weeks. So I'm happy that at least I get a chance today to speak to you and to tell you my part of the story.
Now, I thought this was really interesting. Whether you agree with how Novak handled the situation or not, I am thinking, man, might be hard for him to come back and perform when there's going to be so much emotion when he returns to the court. And he doesn't know, and really, I don't think anybody knows how the crowd is going to receive him. Is it going to be all boos? Is it going to be all cheers? Is it going to be half cheering, half booing? So what do you guys think? When Novak comes back, how will he perform in the tournaments? Is he going to just be the same old Novak, or is this going to affect his play going forward?
To the ordinary Australian listening to you now, who has endured immense sacrifices and restrictions on their liberty over the past couple of years, but who looks at you and says, based on what they see in the news, this guy thinks he's above the law. He thinks that he doesn't have to abide by the same rules as everyone else.
Australia has been through one of the most severe lockdowns that we had since the beginning of the pandemic. So I can only imagine how hard it was for Australians, and I empathize with all the people. And I understand that there has been lots of, frustrations from Australian people towards me and towards the entire situation and the way it was dealt with. And I understand it as well. Reading the newspapers, you get certain conclusions. And so I want to tell them that I always follow the rules.
So when
Now, this part of the interview I really liked. I liked how he acknowledged how hard it's been on the Australian people and the standards that they've had to live on a daily basis. And then it seemed like here comes a spoiled tennis player not following the rules and getting in. He says, listen, I did follow the rules that were presented to me. Now, that's something that I guess that some of people can debate, thinking that he was trying to cheat the system. What do you guys think? Do you think Novak followed the rules, was within the rules, or do you think he was trying to be a special case and take advantage of his privilege of being the number one player in the world?
Prime Minister Scott Morrison says there should be no special rules for Novak Djokovic. You agree with him?
I agree that there shouldn't be any special rules. I never used my privileged status to get into Australia by force or do anything in this entire process. So I was treated as anybody else, and when there was a possibility for a medical exemption, I was using that, and I applied, and I put forward my PCR test, my sufficient amount of antibodies that I had at the time, and I got accepted and approved by 2 independent Australian medical panels anonymously. I think it's important to mention. My name was not on the application, neither did anyone else who applied for medical exemption. I think there was about above 20 or 25 medical exemptions that were reviewed and accepted.
Now, I think this is a major part of the story that wasn't really covered, is he applied anonymously. People didn't know that it was Novak applying for the exemption, and 25 players got accepted under this rule that he didn't make up. And I know there's also some people out there that said, well, Novak, he got COVID on purpose. Some real conspiracy theorists out there. I don't think with how careful Novak is with his body that he's going to intentionally give himself COVID. Let me know what you think, though. Comment below, and let's continue on. But I think that was a really strong point made by Novak is, hey, I applied, and I applied without anybody really knowing it was me.
You conducted a PCR test here in Serbia on December the 16th, 2 days after attending a basketball match where COVID was circulating. Court documents indicate that the Institute of Public Health of Serbia said the result came back positive 7 hours later, around 8 p.m. But you weren't told of that PCR result on that day, were you? You were told only later the next day.
Yes, that's correct.
You did a rapid antigen or lateral flow test the following morning, December the 17th, before attending an awards presentation with children here in Belgrade. That result on that lateral flow test was negative. So, to be clear, you did not know that you had COVID-19 when, unmasked, you met those children.
That is correct.
Okay, now here's where things get interesting, because he got really raked through the coals for going out and hanging out with a bunch of kids. And you can see him there in the picture. And he had COVID at that point, but he did not know he had COVID at that point. He took a test early in the morning. He went to take the test, I guess, from like the hospital, the doctor the day before, but then he took his own test in the morning, checked out negative. So he thought, okay, maybe I'm not positive and I'm going to go and I feel fine. And he's saying, I didn't want to let down the kids, so definitely a lapse in judgment. I'm sure he wishes he could take this back. But at the same time, people make him like a bad person, but it's not like he was out, partying till all hours of the night and doing terrible things. He was actually at an event, trying to be there for the kids, which in my mind, again, makes Novak a good person, maybe making a bad decision, especially when it comes to a public relations decision.
You then received your positive PCR result, i.e. indicating that you did have COVID-19, later that day, December the 17th. Did you, or more likely your team, make any efforts to notify the families of those children, those people present at the award ceremony, that they had been in close company with someone? You did. What sort of efforts did you make?
Yes, we contacted them. We did advise them that, I've received my PCR test and it was positive.
Because as you know, that picture of you, which circulated online with young players, when you had COVID, but you say you weren't aware, it caused huge anger around the world. It seemed like almost a provocation to lots and lots of people. What would you say to those people who argue that it was deeply irresponsible to attend that event before you'd had your PCR test result?
I would say that I understand. I really do. I understand when they, in the context of everything that was happening in Australia, see the photo of me unmasked with children when the night before the Institute of Public Health sent the PCR test, and that I have not seen before that event. And I must say that also I was asymptomatic, so I felt fine. I took the rapid antigen test that morning. As you mentioned, it was negative. I wanted to be there for the children. I know how much it means to them. For me to give them an award, and they worked hard for that. That's all I can say, really. I mean, I saw my PCR positive test only a few hours after that.
But do you wish in retrospect that you hadn't attended that event?
Look, I did not see the PCR test before that. If I have seen it, I wouldn't, of course. But I understand why people are angry, because when they see something like that, it doesn't make them feel comfortable.
So again, it's really easy to play Monday morning quarterback, but Novak here is saying, I was trying to be there for the kids. I know how important it is to the kids. And I'm sure it was extremely important to the kids. I'm sure this is a day, looking back, that most of these kids will not regret, if not all of the kids. Even knowing now that Novak had COVID there, I'm sure many of them are happy that he came anyway. Now, is that saying that Novak should have gone? I'm not saying that, but I'm saying for the kids' experience that were there and got to take a picture with him, I'm sure that Novak being there meant the world to them, and that's what Novak was trying to do on that day, and thinking that he was healthy. Again, not the smartest decision, especially looking back. Just like he says, man, looking back, I know it looks bad, but I wasn't trying to be a bad person.
Did you know that you had COVID-19 when the next day, December the 18th, you conducted an interview and a photo shoot with L'Equipe magazine at your tennis center here in Belgrade?
Yes, and that was a poor judgment of error that I wish I can bring back the time and not have done it.
What was your thinking? Why did you go ahead with that when you knew you had COVID?
Well, several reasons. First, because I respect L'Equipe as one of the best sports paper in the world. Frank, the journalist, was somebody that I've known for many, many years and always had a great relationship with him. And we already have organized that meeting for quite some time. And I didn't want to let him down. Should I have been more cautious? Should I have advised him? Absolutely. I wish I can take it back. It was my mistake. I own it and I stand behind it. And I'm really sorry for that.
Now, really, right here, I think Novak nails it. I think looking at the whole situation, when I look back, I go, this is the one mistake that he definitely made. And again, trying not to let somebody down. Notice the theme here. I'm trying not to let this guy, Frank, he calls him by his first name. He says L'Equipe is a great organization, a lot of work, which is true. A lot of works, a lot of connections need to be made just to get to the number one player in the world and to get an interview confirmed. And so when you break an interview with one of these people who have their heart set on interviewing the number one player in the world, he knows that that is a big blow to the journalist. And so he thought, well, I feel good. You know, if I keep my distance, then everything will be fine. And he said, looking back, this is a mistake. I should not have done this interview. And I'm happy the way he owns it. And throughout the whole entire situation, I think this is the one major mistake that he made, besides, you know, if you're on the mindset of he should get vaccinated anyway. But as far as like clearly an error in judgment, and he owns up to this 100%, which I was happy to see.
Do you remember when you were first made aware that a recent COVID infection, which creates antibodies, would gain you a medical exemption from Australia?
I am not exactly sure of the date, but I remember it was probably the second week of December that we received that circular email where it came to our attention that if you had a recent COVID infection, that you'll be eligible to apply.
And one of the main arguments of your critics is that it's awfully convenient that you got this COVID infection in mid-December because that's the only way you got to play at the Australian Open. What would you say to those critics?
I would say that I take COVID very, very seriously, as really anybody else. And I assure you that I was taking PCR tests as anybody else. I never used my privileged status in this country or any other country. And I was tested hundreds and hundreds of times since the beginning of pandemic because that was required in order to travel and in order to, you know, do my job as a tennis player. You know, I understand that there is a lot of criticism, and I understand that people come out with different theories on how lucky I was or how convenient it is. But, you know, no one is lucky and really convenient of getting COVID. I really don't like someone thinking I've misused something or in my own favor in order to, you know, get a positive PCR test, eventually go to Australia. I had COVID twice. The second time was asymptomatic. The first time was about year and a half ago, and I had symptoms, and it wasn't easy.
And again, I give the journalist credit for asking him point blank, like kind of like saying, hey, it's kind of convenient you got COVID right as you found out that if you have COVID, you get a medical exemption. And here's the thing where you either believe Novak or you don't. Now, if you just look at all the logic behind it, I believe Novak. The reason why, and we're going to get to a little later, why Novak is not getting vaccinated is he says he's very careful about what he puts in his body. And you remember when he first joined the tour, he had trouble breathing in many matches. So I do believe that, you know, he wouldn't mess with something respiratory on purpose to purposely get sick with this. So I just kind of don't believe that. Let me know what you guys think. But I just don't think that this guy's going to intentionally get COVID so he can go play the Australian Open.
No,
So do you worry that people have got the impression, looking at what happened in Australia, looking at what happened here, looking at some of the reporting around this issue, thinking about that tournament you organised, the Adria tournament, which became a super spreader event. Lots of people were pictured unmasked. There wasn't social distancing respected. People look at all this stuff and they say the thing about Novak Djokovic is he doesn't take COVID seriously. What do you say to them?
That is false conclusion. I do take COVID very seriously. And going back to the Adria Tour, we respected every single protocol, rule, and policy that was put in place in Serbia at that moment. So at that moment, there was no mask required. We could host an event. And I understand that looking from a perspective of a different country that had a very strict protocols, that it did not look good. But every country has been dealing with COVID slightly differently.
Your agent wrongly said that you had not been anywhere other than Serbia before travelling to Australia. In fact, you had been to Spain. Can you see why a lot of people, unaware of the detail of this saga, again get the impression that you or your team were willing to play fast and loose with the rules?
I understand why people think that when you chronologically take all these things in consideration, feel like I have cheated or I've done something that is not right. But I always did the right thing. It was a human error made from one of the members of my team, and that has not influenced my deportation from Australia.
So here, when you just see everything adding up, the Adria Tour, his team saying that he hadn't left the country when he had, and then I know on the passport information when you're coming into the country, they filled out something wrong. So it's just one debacle after the next. And this is where I don't think Novak is doing this intentionally, but this is where you could argue he doesn't take things seriously enough. And I go back to, there was an interview where someone said, hey, you're getting pretty close to the line with how you're losing your temper. And somebody could get hurt one day by the way, you fireballs into the stands and things like that. Novak basically scoffed him off and was saying, like, you're being ridiculous. And then, a couple of years later, he has that incident with hitting the lady at the U.S. Open and gets defaulted out of there. So I think that, when you are going to be number one in the world, you live under a microscope. You have to go through things that no one else has to go through, and you've got to be thinking 3 steps ahead. I think this is where Novak falls short. He's not like Roger, always playing chess. A lot of times maybe he's playing checkers or even, I don't know, Scrabble or something. So I think that this is something that Novak, sooner than later has got to realize. He's got to take his actions more seriously because they have major consequences to him and the world.
Have you received any vaccination against COVID?
I have not.
Why?
I understand that and support fully the freedom to choose, whether you want to get vaccinated or not. And I have not spoken about this before, and I have not disclosed my medical record and my vaccination status because I had the right to keep that private and discreet. But as I see, there's a lot of wrong conclusions and assumptions out there. I think it's important to speak up about that and justify certain things, right? So I was never against vaccination. I understand that globally, everyone is trying to put a big effort into handling this virus and seeing hopefully an end soon to this virus. And vaccination is probably the biggest effort that was made. Probably half of the planet was vaccinated. And I fully respect that. But I've always represented and always supported the freedom to choose what you put into your body. And for me, that is essential. It's really the principle of understanding what is right and what is wrong for you. And me as an elite professional athlete, I've always carefully reviewed, assessed everything that comes in from the supplements, food, the water that I drink or sports drinks, anything really that comes into my body as a fuel that I can benefit from. So I take that very seriously. There's a process of precise decision making It has been like that for the last 20 years, and that allowed me to endure this much. So based on all the informations that I got, I decided not to take the vaccine as of today. I just don't have enough clarity of how the COVID vaccine will affect me and whether it's going to, create a certain effect on my game, and I wouldn't have the benefits that I would normally have. So I just don't feel at the moment this is the right thing for me to have.
See, that's so interesting, because the World Health Organization position is that the vaccine is effective across all age groups. You're not saying that you doubt that it's effective against COVID-19. You're saying that you just don't know the full range of the effects it will have inside your body. And until you have more information, you're not going to have that vaccine.
That's exactly what it is. We are all trying to find collectively a best possible solution to end COVID. I'm part of a sport, a very global sport that is played every single week in a different location. So, I understand the consequences of my decision. And one of the consequences of my decision was not going to Australia, and I was prepared not to go. And I understand that not being vaccinated today, I'm unable to travel to most of the tournaments at the moment.
And that's the price you're willing to pay?
That is the price that I'm willing to pay.
Do you have a particular concern about this vaccine, or a general view that if you have to take a vaccine, it says something bad about your approach to your own health?
No, I don't have anything against the general approach to vaccines. I had vaccines when I was a kid. I just feel that currently I just don't have enough information about this vaccine. And as an elite athlete, I am very mindful of what I put into my body. And I made a decision that I don't want to get vaccinated at the moment.
Where does this come from? I'm so fascinated, because I can see that you believe extremely strongly in the sanctity and the sovereignty of the individual and the individual's right to choose. Where does that come from? Why do you think like this?
Well, perhaps it has something to do with my upbringings. During 90s, when I started playing tennis, when I was 4 or 5 years old, we had 2 wars, and we had embargo, sanctions, just waiting in line for bread and milk. It was a very difficult time for my family, and I chose to play the sport that is one of the most expensive sports and very unaffordable sport for a lot of people. And my parents had to endure a lot of hardships in order to allow me to live my dream. And also, when I was traveling, I had to very quickly mature and be independent and take care of myself, because I could not travel with my father or with my family members or coaches. So many of the tournaments I traveled alone.
So you became self-reliant quite young.
I became self-reliant from very early on. And I think that helped me to really establish my own character from very early on, and just hold my ground.
What you're outlining is a classic tension in political philosophy, which is individual freedom and the right to choose versus the collective good. And often in life, they come into tension with each other.
Wow, so much to unpack there. And, I had been saying, I was like, I wish Novak would just come out and say the reason why. I want to know the reason why. And my theory is exactly what Novak said, is that he's so careful and particular about what he puts in his body. Everything that he puts in his body is so carefully scrutinized, and he doesn't feel he has enough information to trust it. And I know for people listening out there, they can say, well, that's, we all just have to trust it for the collective good, right? And that's what this is about, the individual choice versus the collective good. This is certainly where I get confused. I mean, for the collective good, I think you should get vaccinated, and I am vaccinated. But I also understand Novak's situation, because people watching this might not remember, this guy was struggling to breathe in tennis matches. He was called weak. Can you imagine this? Novak was called weak by some of his most respected colleagues. Andy Roddick basically made fun of him. Roger Federer made fun of him after a match, basically questioning his heart, his training, his real commitment to the game. And it was because he couldn't breathe out there. So he dedicated to find out what's wrong with me. And then ever since then, he's been obsessed with things like this. And so he might be afraid that if he gets the vaccination, it might not go well for him. Now, for the entire world, when we're talking percentages, yes, it's a good thing. But we can even point to a tennis player, Jeremy Chardy, where it wasn't a good thing. He got vaccinated because he was trying to, do for the collective good, for the good of the world. And it backfired on him to where he did not respond well to vaccinations. And all last year, he couldn't play. And this is a guy who's played a long time on tour, wanted to keep playing, was playing well, and is in the later stages of his career. So, maybe things like that, stories like that come back to Novak, reaffirm his mindset, like, I'm not going to get vaccinated because I don't want to take that risk.
Except that what might be good for you individually may be harmful to the collective welfare. If one person chooses not to get vaccinated, that might undermine the collective good.
I respect and I fully support someone, thinking a certain way. Everyone is entitled to their opinion. Everyone is entitled and have a fundamental human right to choose whatever they want to put in their body. And I just hope that people will respect what I chose.
The Immigration Minister, Alex Hawke, who cancelled your visa the second time, said that you were potentially going to inspire anti-vax sentiment. And the judges who unanimously upheld his decision said, and I quote, "An iconic world tennis star may influence people of all ages, young or old, but perhaps especially the young and impressionable, to emulate him. This is not fanciful," they said. "It does not need evidence." What do you say to that?
Well, I completely disagree with that perception. And I'm really sad and disappointed that I was deported on those bases from Australia. I don't know what more I can say.
But you do inspire people, don't you? You inspire young people.
I do inspire people, but I never inspired people to go out on the streets and protest and be part of the anti-vax. I never inspired that.
What do you say directly to anti-vaccination campaigners around the world who proudly declare Novak Djokovic is one of us?
I say that everyone has the right to choose to act or say whatever they feel is appropriate for them. And I have never said that I'm part of that movement. No one in the whole process during Australian saga has asked me on my stance or my opinion on vaccination. No one. So I could not really express, what I feel and where my stance is, neither in the legal process, neither outside. So it's really unfortunate that there has been this kind of misconception and wrong conclusion that has been made around the world based upon, something that I completely disagree with.
I'm not here to sympathise with you, but I do want to understand you better. And I can imagine, listening to you, that your experience in that detention hotel was far from pleasant. Can you just talk us through what it was like?
Well, definitely it wasn't pleasant, but, I don't want to be sit here and complaining about conditions in that detention center because I stayed 7 days, around 7 days, and some people there have stayed for years. It has deeply touched me, what people in the detention center in Melbourne are going through, and so, my hardship was nothing close to what these people are going through.
Really like Novak's response there, not taking the bait of trying to throw a pity party for himself as far as how he's treated in the detention center. Said it wasn't easy, but he said, look, people have been in there for years. And, that sheds light on a much broader issue that is just so tough to deal with is, you find in all parts of the world that the way people are treated, that you don't even know they're living in the shadows. I didn't know that people were living in there for years, and I don't know their stories why they're living in there for years. So I can't even really comment intelligently on it, other than it just sounds really heartbreaking, and maybe it's necessary, maybe it's not. I don't know enough, but that's kind of the shame in all this is you have a big international celebrity, is put in a detention center. And all of a sudden everybody cares when you've got people living there for years and no one cares or even knows about it.
Did you feel powerless?
Yes, I did feel powerless. When I arrived, I was not allowed to use my phone for 3-4 hours. It was the middle of the night from 1 a.m. to 9 a.m. Didn't get any sleep because I was going through questioning every 30 minutes, basically. And then, of course, I stayed there for 4 or 5 days before the first court hearing. I was hoping for a good result, and the visa was reinstated, first revoked, then reinstated, and revoked again. So I was free for 4 days and I was training. But it was not a regular kind of training days that I would normally have prior to the Grand Slam competition. I had helicopters flying, above every single training session that I had on Rod Laver Arena, cameras all over the place. Also my colleagues, and that really hurt me a lot, because I felt that energy and those looks from my colleagues and people that were in the tennis facility. And obviously I understand that they had a perception that was based on what they were seeing from media reports, and I wasn't going out in media because of what I previously said, in respecting the legal process and respecting Australian Open. But at that time, I really wanted to speak to everyone and give my explanation. And so, because I greatly care about the relationships with people.
Now, what Novak just said there is huge to me, saying I greatly care about the relationships of people. And this is where I think it's been something so hard for him his entire career, is somehow at some point he got labeled as the villain. And, I don't think that Novak is a villain. I've seen Novak be really great. I've been to a tournament and watched him treat people so kind. And, to go through this, and now all of a sudden he's feeling his colleagues looking at him a certain way. He's trying to practice. The helicopters are above. And I'm just really curious to see how can he respond when he actually steps on the court again? Because you would love to think that people are going to be classy and accepting. I'm going to be. But there's going to be some place he goes where he comes out to a bunch of jeers and boos, and it's important to him. He's not a robot. And so how will he respond to this tennis-wise and emotionally? It's going to be very, very interesting moving forward.
Particularly the people that hopefully I'll be able to see for many years to come, because they're my colleagues, they're my peers, they're people that I see probably at times more than my family. So it was a very uncomfortable feeling that I had during those days.
Let's look to the future. You say that as things stand, you don't have enough clarity about the COVID-19 vaccine in order to let it enter your body. If that changes, if you get enough new information that persuades you that it's not going to cause you harm, which you don't want, would you be prepared to change your mind?
There is always a possibility that things will change in the future. As of today, this is my decision and my stance for it. And I will, suffer the consequences of not traveling to the tournaments. But hopefully the things will be able to change in the future, and I keep my mind open, and we'll see what happens.
And longer term, are you hoping that the international regulations change and ease in order to let you travel to these tournaments?
I sincerely hope so, because I would really love to play tennis, because this is what I do. I'm a professional tennis player.
But as things stand, if this means that you miss the French Open, is that a price you'd be willing to pay?
Yes, that is the price that I'm willing to pay. At the moment, of course, I hope that things will change, but I'm also hoping that I can play for many more years. So taking care of my body has always been the highest priority, and because I know that that's going to give me longevity. And I'm certain that if there is still that flair and passion and love for the game in me, and if I take care of my body, I'll be able to have many more opportunities to play the tournaments that I miss.
And if it means that you miss Wimbledon this year, again, that's a price you're willing to pay?
Yes.
Ultimately, are you prepared to forego the chance to be the greatest player that ever picked up a racket, statistically, because you feel so strongly about this jab?
Yes. I do.
Why, Novak? Why?
Because the principles of decision-making on my body are more important than any title.
And boom, there it is. That's the moment, bombshell moment I think everybody's been waiting for is, will you get vaccinated, and would you be willing to give up the GOAT title because of your belief that getting vaccinated just isn't in your best interest? And he said it right there. He said, I'm willing to skip the French Open. I'm willing to skip Wimbledon. He even understands because it's an international sport, why the rules are the way they are. But he is hoping that, at some point we'll be able to figure out a way to be able to travel, and people who are not vaccinated can go and participate in things. So, I mean, that is just a massive statement from Novak. And, it kind of also then opens up the whole GOAT debate. After Rafa won the Australian Open, I say he's the GOAT because he has 21. And everybody else, doesn't. And Novak easily, based on how his performance was, especially last year winning 3 out of 4 of the majors, could have 21 right now. He owns Australia. He could back up another French Open. He does great at Wimbledon. I mean, in theory, he could walk away with 23 after this year. Instead, he might watch Rafa have 22 or 23 and him stuck at 20. And who knows when he's getting back on the court. And then who knows, yes, Novak wants to play for years to come, but when years go by, Father Time's undefeated. So how many years does Novak realistically have left to dominate, especially if you give up a year or two of competition? The tour is always moving forward. So this is a huge roll of the dice by Novak. And we'll see how it plays out.
Or anything else.
But do you understand why a lot of people looking at you with admiration, what you've achieved, you're still only 34, you've got a lot of tennis ahead of you, would find this baffling? They'd say they've had the jab, they've been triple jabbed, it didn't hurt, it didn't affect them, they didn't have after effects. Here's a guy who could win 30 Grand Slams, but he might end up with 21, 22, 23 because he feels so strongly about this principle of the right to choose. Can you understand why people find that hard to understand?
I truly understand and respect. And I hope that they can respect, if they cannot understand, at least respect my decision to do so.
Given you're usually in Grand Slam finals, it must have been a strange experience for you watching Rafa Nadal against Medvedev in the Australian Open final. What was it like to watch the final? Presumably you saw it on TV.
I didn't want to watch the match because I felt I wanted to be on the court. It was really hard for me to watch and participate in a match in any way. So I was very neutral. I didn't cheer for anyone because I wanted to be there so badly. But I was amused by the circumstances that I was experiencing of my wife was cheering for Medvedev, my son was cheering for Nadal, and every point that Rafa would make, Stefan would be jumping around and fist pumping like Rafa.
But if you were playing against Nadal, he would support you over Nadal, right?
Yes, I mean I hope so. Yes,
that'd be awkward at home if.
But he asked me a few days ago when I was putting him to sleep, when is the next tournament where you're going to participate and play, where Rafa is going to be also? And I said, well, I'm not sure. I hope very soon. And I said, why are you asking me that? He said, because I would really love to make a photo with Rafa. I said, we'll arrange that, I'm sure.
I'm sure you can get that done. Look, you're 34. You have a lot of tennis and life ahead of you. What do you want your legacy to be?
I've been blessed with amazing results that I've made throughout my career. I hope that I can still continue to make records, break records in the future. But it's not the most essential thing of reason why I still play tennis. I play tennis because I still feel connection with the inner child, the 4-year-old boy that took a racket and said, I love this sport, I want to play it all day. I still do it in my center today, being in a role of a player and a coach and a mentor at the same time. I spend most of my time being in Serbia here in this tennis center. I'm coaching kids of different ages on the court, and I always encourage them to ask questions because it's important. You're not supposed to know everything, but if you draw the strength and the motivation from the right source, which for me is always the passion and love for the game, you will always find that necessary energy to deal with hardships on and off the court throughout your career.
And whether you like Novak or not, I think you got to respect the hell out of the end of that interview. I am playing not for the records, although he does say he plays for the records. So don't get that confused. I mean, he clearly wants the records, but he says the main thing that trumps everything is I play for the passion and the love of the game, the inner child. I mean, that is just awesome. So what do you guys think of this interview? I thought it was a great interview. I thought the person doing the interview did an amazing job, asked all the right questions, and Novak did a great job responding openly and honestly. And when do you guys think you're going to see Novak on the court again? Will he be able to play in the French Open, Wimbledon, US Open, or is it going to be quite a while before we see what could be the GOAT and back up on the court? Thanks so much for watching this video. If you like this video, give it a big thumbs up. Subscribe. My name is Pete from Crunch Time Coaching. I'm an online tennis instructor, but I love tennis too. I've got the passion for the game just like Novak, although he's a lot better player. Anyway, Novak, I love you, and I love all the tennis players out there. Love Roger, love Rafa, love Medvedev. I just love the sport, and just wanted to go over this with you guys, and I hope you're having a great day.